This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. We'll be covering those stories a bit later in the show, but our deep dive tonight centers around deforestation happening in a region maybe not immediately associated with deforestation, Eastern Europe. But first, a quick question. How many of y'all have a piece of IKEA furniture somewhere in your house? Some of you? Most of you? I know a lot of us do. Check out all these IKEA setups from the ITL team. And it's no surprise. IKEA is one of the largest furniture retailers in the world and a leader in a booming global furniture market. The market hit an estimated value of over $490 billion last year. The IKEA brand in particular is known for its pretty affordable products in exchange for assembling it yourself, of course, with multiple instruction booklets. But there are a lot of unseen costs that go into supplying cheap, mass-produced wooden furniture to major retailers. Namely, costs from how and where that wood gets harvested. Eastern Europe and Russia offer a huge supply of high quality and high value woods like spruce and beech. And countries like Ukraine and Romania are home to huge old growth forests. Old growth forests are well sought after, but also some of the most important to protect. They're particularly crucial for biodiversity, and old trees absorb carbon dioxide at higher rates than younger ones. Now, estimates vary, but one environmental watchdog group determined more than half of IKEA's wood supply comes from that region. To be clear, IKEA is far from the only major furniture supplier here, but it is arguably the biggest. The company alone is the largest individual consumer of wood in the world and doubled its consumption in the last decade. We reached out to IKEA to ask them about all this, and the company has said before that under no circumstances would they accept wood that doesn't meet their sustainability requirements. They've also taken action against problematic suppliers before. To balance the growing global demand for wood with conservation of these crucial forests, the EU and national governments have established massive protected areas and quotas limiting how much of a certain wood gets harvested. This is likely what an older Mati from Captain Planet and the Planeteers would do without his magic ring. These protections, by the way, apply to both public and private land. That's important to note because IKEA itself is the largest private landowner in Romania. They own about 83,000 acres. That's almost 63,000 football fields worth of land. They made this massive purchase back in 2015, buying from the previous owner, the Harvard Endowment Fund. Yeah, that Harvard. Everybody wants a piece of these trees. But despite the legal limits and forest management, the woods of Eastern Europe are vanishing much faster than they should be, and it's only ramping up. These maps from Global Forest Watch show the total tree cover loss in Ukraine, Russia, and Romania over the past 2 decades. Part of this is due to deforestation, legally or otherwise. In 2018, for example, the Romanian government licensed about 18.5 million cubic meters of wood to be harvested. But instead, about 38.6 million was taken, more than twice the legal limit.
It's also a breakdown of the sort of European laws meant to deal with this. Romania designated quite large amounts of its forest as protected areas. They never created the implementing regulations to actually implement those laws.
So how is this happening right under regulators' noses? The problems often start early in the supply chain. For example, loggers can use false documentation to hide the amount or quality of the wood they're harvesting. Sometimes it's as simple as submitting unclear or misleading photos to the local government's tracking system, obscuring how much wood is really being harvested. Then the illegal wood is taken to a log depot where it often gets mixed in with legal wood. Sounds a lot like wood laundering to me. Enforcing rules on the ground becomes next to impossible thanks to what the press has dubbed the so-called timber mafia, which is a group well ingrained in local communities.
There's many excellent Romanian news reports, investigative reports about this, and many interviews, for example, with police officers who are just admitting very clearly on camera that they cannot touch these people.
And standing up to illegal loggers is dangerous work. Like other hotspots for illegal logging in the world, a number of forest managers, rangers, activists, and journalists have been attacked or even killed throughout Eastern Europe and Russia. In Romania alone, at least 6 forest rangers have been killed in recent years, with 650 incidents of people being beaten, shot at, or attacked in relation to illegal logging. We'll speak to an environmentalist who survived an attack just a little bit later. So, how can furniture retailers ensure the wood they're using was safely and legally sourced? Furnishers often rely on something called the Forest Stewardship Certification, or FSC, to vet the sourcing for wood products. Third-party companies can be hired to conduct an audit along the supply chain, from the log depots to sawmills and more. And they can award an FSC certification if the work there seems legit. But critics have pointed out some central flaws to the audit process and warned FSC certifications may be giving a false sense of security.
There's this kind of conflict of interest because IKEA is paying directly for an FSC certificate. So this does not create much incentive for these auditors to independently look for problems.
We've talked to some certifying bodies that have said, I was commissioned by this company. I spent 3 days in the forest. I gave them this list of 20 things that they would need to change to get their certification. They said, thank you very much. And 3 days later, they got their certification from a different company.
And there have been a number of separate investigations throughout Eastern Europe which found illegal timber processing at partners with IKEA, all of which were FSC certified. The UK watchdog group Earthsight published 2 reports showing illegal wood from forests in Ukraine and Russia has been widely used in popular IKEA furniture lines like these.
It was a combination of looking at shipment records and undercover work, calls to the suppliers concerned. It was also, in both cases, in Ukraine and in Russia, there's actually a lot of information that's available publicly, which is fantastic. But also then begs the question that, if we could find it, why did it take IKEA so long to find it, or FSC for that matter?
IKEA's response was to defend its reliance on FSC certifications. The company insisted it was improving its system of due diligence checks. We reached out for a response on this. We didn't hear back from IKEA, but the FSC drew out attention to other cases like in Ukraine, where they're working to prevent illegal logging despite the complexity of the situation.
I think IKEA is doing, perhaps more than any other large wood processor in the world. The problem is that the status quo, the bar of the status quo is so low that's still very far from what is necessary to make sure that they're not getting illegal wood.
It's hard to know where to start with a system like this. The danger for those working on the ground, the corruption along supply chains, the documented abuse of the FSC labels. What these problems really come down to is a lack of enforcement. We want to take a minute to spotlight what it's like on the front lines here, trying to protect these forests and investigate illegal logging. Joining us today is Gabriel Paon, the president of environmental NGO Agent Green, calling in from Eastern Europe. He asked us not to disclose where exactly for his own safety. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us. To start, can you tell us about how you first got involved with the work that you do? When did you first become aware of how widespread the problem is for illegal logging, and what made you want to stand up against it?
Well, to be honest, the appetite to become an advocate of Mother Nature came as a calling while I was a little boy. I just had a chance to have an experience in nature. So I've been doing this kind of campaigning for nature and natural habitats for the past 22 years. In Romania, my home country, but also in other parts of the world where there are still remaining intact forest landscape that deserves to be preserved.
One of the things that I think our audience will come to understand is that being a nature advocate can also be very dangerous work. Can you tell us a bit about the danger of this work? I mean, you've had firsthand experiences with this.
Fellow colleagues of mine have been severely hurt, and some of them even perished. I was myself part of events, life-threatening events, but for some reason, we're saying a cat might have 9 lives. I think I have lost all those 9, and I'm beyond that. And somehow I survived. There were situations when a bunch of thugs had really beat me up really hard, and they thought I was killed. I was laying down without being able to move. but somehow I survived, and doctors repaired me. The only thing that haven't been fixed is the psychological trauma, which takes a bit longer. But to be honest, nothing stopped me from continuing what I'm doing, because I realized that if I stop, I'm dead from the spiritual point of view, and this fight is too important to give up.
I think a lot of folks would hear your story and think, how could you not be deterred after threats of and, realized violence? I mean, what is it that makes you continue doing this work and continue to be, an advocate for nature on the front lines?
To be honest, being aware what's at stake, which is the future of humanity, there is no second thought whether I want to continue this or not. And the more it's understood by the public, the more we come together in a common goal to basically preserve these forests, which are not just home for thousands of species, but it's the lungs of humankind. I mean, together, the Amazon, the Indonesian forest, the forest of Congo, and in the temperate latitude, the forests of Romania and some forests in Georgia are really the last lungs that we have on planet Earth. And it's basically a bridge from the past to the future that we have to defend at any cost.
What do you wish people understood more about this issue?
I think regardless if we are in United States, Romania, or elsewhere in the world, we have to understand that besides the necessity to save these forests for a lot of reasons, climate change is the most alarming one, affecting us all. And when it comes about climate change, nations have no sovereignty. Climate change doesn't understand that. It affects us all. So this is a call from me to you, to everyone, to be united everywhere around the world for the cause of saving the climate by preserving the last primary and old forests.
Gabriel Paon is the president of environmental NGO Agent Green. Thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.